Lava is so much fun. And this is a light up lava terrain board. I've got Shatterpoint set up at the moment, but it would work with so many different games. I've had so much fun building this, and I'm going to show you how I made it. So this story has to start with a big thanks to Asmodee UK, who sent me the Shatterpoint core set. They did send it me before Shatterpoint came out, and I am a month late with this, but it's worth saying Shatterpoint is a fun game and the minis are absolutely gorgeous. And all this terrain came in the core set. Now, I wanted to do something special to show it off, and I was also thinking about what my next Kickstarter would be, and lava came to mind. So my next Kickstarter is Corix, the Lava Moon. Not only do you get the terrain I'm going to show you in this video, there's accessories, there's all sorts of exciting stuff yet to come. But this isn't a video about that. This is a video about a light up lava table. It always starts with a design sketch, and this was my lava table I designed in Blender. Now, it's completely different to that now because I needed to make it modular and this isn't. I needed it to fit on a normal printer and this doesn't. And I might do some sexy things like Vader's castle in the middle of the waterfalls. But you get the general idea. I then spent quite a while designing lava tiles. There's over 40 of them designed so far, and I've still got the factory half with channels and equipment and pools, etc. to go. And because this is lit up, I needed a base. So there's a whole base designed. It's going to look really cool. And then of course, it's time to print. Now I used 4 different printers for this, but I put the same clear filament in all of them after I'd used up the odds and ends I had in the cupboard. This is Sunlu transparent filament, and what can I say? It does look really impressive, but I've since found out you can get an orange translucent PLA. If you're doing this, consider perhaps experimenting. One of the printers though was a little bit stringy, so if ever you get that, just don't worry, get out your blowtorch the edges and watch the strings magically disappear. This is 3 foot by 3 foot and is made of 36 tiles. So let's get the base out of the way. Not the most exciting part, but absolutely vital to lighting. There's a 6-inch square base that open lock clips into its neighbours, and small little mini clips that go into the base to clip on pillars and sides, etc. But this is a prototype, and I did find a number of issues. One of which is clear filament is actually incredibly brittle, and almost every time I used a mini clip, it broke. So I ended up using lots of them, and where I didn't need them to be clear, I used normal PLA, which has a lot more flex in it. I also didn't get the base design quite right, but more of that in a minute. Let's just say for now that the largest thing you can ever produce on a printer is never going to be that robust as you make it bigger. So I put in a series of pillars and sort of strengthening across each gap on the tiles and left it at that for now. I spent literally an hour or two trying to work out how to work out which way up each of these corners went so that they alternated, considering there's an even number on the sides. And in the end, I just went with, there's a narrow slot at the bottom on the first edge. That's it, the narrow slot goes at the bottom. That means the top edge, through which the light has to shine, needed masking off before I painted these black, which I did outside. Can I just show off my new whizzy mixer for a drill? Apparently spinning is better than shaking for cans. 20 seconds on this, job done. I'm using Car Automotive black matte paint. Perfect for terrain. An airbrush is just too small to cover the volume I need. This is nice and robust. I only need 1 coat to cover. Job done. Oh, and because it stinks, I do it outside. But how to prime the clear tiles? I want to prime them because acrylic paint doesn't really stick to 3D prints that well. Well, the answer is matte, spray, varnish. Perfect. Now practice makes perfect, and I didn't want to start on my 36 tiles and screw them up, so I did these test pieces. If you haven't seen the video, why not? It's linked in a card above. But I did 4 different colours, but this is the Mustafar colour that I'll be using on this base. And there's a lot to paint, so I went with cheap artist acrylics. I got some primary colours and I got some fluorescent colours. So I've put all the paint recipes that I used up. Basically, cooled lava is grey, and it's used everywhere, and I dry brushed the warm grey over the top to get a nice highlight on it, and it blocks light because it's got so much black in it, and that's really important because you want the lava to glow, and all of these colours, especially the fluorescents, are quite translucent when put on thinly. You want them to glow with the light, but you don't want the areas that are cool to glow because they're solid rock. I've mixed them all with varying amounts of paint, just splurger this, splurger that. As you can see, I'm not measuring. And they're all thinned with water to make them nice and spreadable. Artist acrylics are generally too thick and you'll end up with brush strokes, which you don't want. So thin it until your brush strokes don't show. And what's great about these colours, they look good even when not lit. And that's the trick to this board. You don't always want the lights to be on. So now we've got all the colours mixed. It's time to start painting. And I haven't mentioned, before I started painting, I looked at a lot of video. But because this is a terrain board for a game, I looked at Star Wars. I went and looked at Mustafar. I'd already looked at Solus, Battlefront 2, different colour. So I decided this board was going to be the Mustafar orangey reds. And they're mostly orangey red. And it's great. I watched Star Wars, I watched the Clone Wars. It's even in Rogue One. So you can spend a lot of time looking at Mustafar on TV and get lost for ages. But when you come back to it, you need to paint your tiles with a nice thin base colour to get into all those cracks. There's no point spending hours printing all of these tiles if you don't use the modelling that's within them. And that was the mistake I made. I started to paint the lava rather than dry brush it like I had on the test pieces. So I lost my way very much in this. So we're going to see a quick paint of what I did first, and then I started again. So not everything I did the first time was a complete fail. I painted 2 yellow coats because one was not enough and I was still seeing white tiles through it. I then also painted red, so the cracks would be red, and I painted the lava, the cooled lava colour on the top using a nice thick brush, solid brush, so I was only catching the tips, and then filling in the edges with a more detailed brush. And actually I wish I'd dry brushed these a bit more. I felt like the transition from cold lava to glow lava to sort of the lava river was better on my test prints than on this particular one. I felt like it was too solid a line. I also felt that I wasn't getting this type of texture, this beautiful brown. I was getting more of a painted texture. And especially by the end, after I'd done a few more layers, I was painting the lava rather than using the dry brush technique. And it looks all right at the moment. And then I put the brown on. And I didn't video that, but it looked awful. Absolutely awful. So they all went in the bathroom sink. Out came the nail brush and they got scrubbed. It took quite a bit of the high points off. So I then went through and put pale yellow and orange, light orange, on them again. And because they were still wet, it flowed into all the troughs, but some of it did stay on the peaks, which is where I needed it. And by the time I'd done all that, I was feeling so much happier about the lava. So I think the moral of the story is you need 2 base coats of yellow, you need a light orange base coat, a medium orange, bit of splodging, and then you need to dry brush, which is what I'm doing here. I got out my dry brush and I painted the tops. I did not paint the troughs with the darker colour. And this is key for lava because lava is yellow when it's hot and it's dark grey when it's cold. And in between it moves through oranges, reds and browns. And if you are painting the lava, then you're putting too much into the troughs, which are actually hotter because they're at the bottom and nearer the moltenness. And you actually need the tops of the lava to be the dark oranges and browns. And actually, the brown looked too much on these small rivers. It just looked too weird. These are much faster flowing because they're smaller. It was okay on these bigger rivers, but it just didn't work. And actually, the darkest colour I really used was the dark red for the crack, rather than going to brown on this particular board. Whew, so there we are. Or is it? Well, actually, what I learnt when turning the light on this test tile, you see I've got orange cellophane in there, and that's because when I turned the light on, so much of it glowed white. And if I take that cellophane off, I've got a perfect light box to check just how good my painting is. And the answer is, ooh, there are some white spots. Well, I can go over those with yellow paint and fill them in. They're all probably in the low spots. And then I checked it looked all right when the lights were off, because that's what it's going to look like most of the time. But it wasn't just the lava that needed retouching. I mean, I had scrubbed this with a nail brush, so it's not a surprise it needed it. But you can see how bad the cracks were, and I'd also taken some of that dark grey off the edges. The cracks were way worse than the lava though, so they also got another coat of paint. Then all I needed to do was re-dry brush the top and actually give it a bit of life by going over that with some warm grey, just to catch a few of the edges and make it stand out and not all look flat and boring. But one area was still looking flat, and that's the edges of the lava. They should be glowing. So I decided to do some object source lighting, OSL, i.e. I'm going to paint the glow. There will be some glow coming through from the lava, but actually the lights I'm going to use are not that strong, so we're not going to put a searchlight amount up there. And, well, it needed a little something. So I went over it first with warm grey. You could probably use white for this, just to lighten up that area, before painting the light colour. Now, it can't be brighter than the lava, and most of the lava is quite a dark orange around the edge, so I diluted some dark orange and just ran that in there. And the very, very final thing was a light brush of warm grey just around that edge where the light might be falling out onto the cooled rock area. And then to protect them, I gave them a healthy dose of matte varnish outside, and now it's time to put them all together. I'm using open lock clips to clip everything together. I've got the normal PLA ones, and wherever I'm using a clear part, I use a clear clip so that the light will shine through and I won't get any weird shapes. That's it, clip away. Except it wasn't. I realised I put clips in every single one for robustness, but I got to the stage I couldn't physically clip them together when they got to the bigger, longer runs. Doing them this size, fine. Doing this size, I mean, I actually pulled a muscle in my shoulder and I still couldn't get them together. I tried them as 3s, I tried them as 6s, I just couldn't physically get these to clip together. I took out the majority of the clips and only left a few in per tile, and I still struggled. Eventually I got there, and I was left with a 3-foot board that was a real struggle to put anywhere. The base was no better. But I persevered. I used strips of just copy paper to blank out the white on the grills. I'd originally left them open thinking LEDs are going to get really hot, it will need some air through there. But actually in reality, I didn't like the way it looked. It just looked like there were LED strips behind a grill. So I used this white paper just to mask it slightly, and I hope they don't overheat. There's actually a big gap for that very reason. And when I'd put it all together, it was wobbly. Now I know a top will help that, but I've no idea how I will get the top to clip into the middle ones. It's just these clips are tight, the holes are tight. It's not immediately obvious to me. And I stood there for a long time and looked at it. And then I took it all apart and decided to make it as 3 1-foot by 3-foot boards, which are actually more manageable, will fit on my shelf, and will be far, far more useful. The only downside is I didn't have enough edges, so 2 days of printing later, I was able to get on. And that meant turning my attention to lighting. I've got 2 of these LED strips. They're not expensive, but they come with an app that gives you firelight, candlelight, all sorts of things. You've also got a remote control, so you can just change the colour to a fixed one, and you can do marquees, pulses, chases, runs, tails, all sorts of effects. If you find the idea of LED strips, soldering especially, daunting, don't worry. You can just buy connectors that will plug into the ends once you've cut the strips. It's actually very easy to do, but gets a little expensive, so I chose to solder. Now, whatever you're doing with LED strips, there's a couple of things to bear in mind. One, there are snip points where you can cut them and they're marked, and there's little copper terminals there which you can solder onto. Don't cut them anywhere else, you'll break the strip. 2, there's arrows on the strips, and you have to wire the electricity coming in from the arrow and flowing down. You can choose whether you wire them just continuously from the end of one into the start of the next one. Or I've done them in parallel because it's shorter, which basically means I've wired the top of each of these. I wired on plugs to go between the boards, and they have to go in order, so I may have to create something if I just want to light one of the boards. But you start on the first one, wire the second and then the third onto them, and they just plug together. And then all I had to do was keep testing, put the top on, and before you know it, I have a lit up board. Now, because I have two different controllers in here, I can actually do two different lighting effects, which is really cool, because I do think that is a little bit too But, you know, I can make them flicker, I can make them do whatever I want. I tested everything multiple times as I went, and when I was happy it was all working well, I hot glued it all in place. Finally, I clipped the lava onto the base, and I did take out all of the middle clips. There was just no way I could get them to line up and click in. It's hard enough just getting the edge ones in. I have a confession. I still haven't painted many of my Shatterpoint minis. I need them all done for September when I'm seeing Asmodee with this board, so let's hope I get them done by then. But in the meanwhile, I did my B1s and Kalani, and let's just say Kalani took a long time. All my Shatterpoint bases are being done with a lava theme, no matter what Shatterpoint decided to put on the base. So I've added orange cracks around everything, whether it's supposed to be ground and rocks or panels and bits and bobs. So in this case, bright orange, and then round the edge, just to give it a bit of a differential, a darker orange. I use black enamel Tamiya panel liner. It kind of creates a bit of a shadow and adds some effects, just darkens down those rocks a bit as well. Then all I had to do was assemble the boards, put out some buildings, put on my objective markers, and I've got loads of accessories that go with this, but for now I'm going to leave those for another video. But you need some way to get over the lava, so I threw on all of these grills that I'd quickly spray painted. They're kind of rejects from another project. Threw them all over, and I was good to play. So a big thank you to Asmodee UK, who sent me the Shatterpoint core set. They've set me down a path of doing some amazing lava stuff to go with it. And this isn't the end of it. I'm running a Kickstarter at the end of September, which will feature all this lava terrain for you to buy if you want to. I'm going to be doing another video on the accessories. You can see some of them here, but there's loads more still to come. There's a waterfall end board. Yep, it's going to have lava waterfalls, Vader's castle, and Jewel of the Fates going over a waterfall. Loads more to come. And as I said, Kickstarter coming if you're interested in purchasing it. There is actually a link up already for that, a sort of pre-launch page. So I'll put links down for that in the description and cards and all that malarkey that YouTube has. Don't forget, if you enjoyed the video, subscribe, like, hit the bell button, all the usual things, and let me know in the comments any thoughts that you have. But that's it for this video. See you next time.